Okay, so we have the speed going. So how was the writing going? I've got 4 essays so far, and Jan Gregor has a 5th one, and we will talk about those today. But those who didn't submit, did you started writing or? Okay, so hopefully today's class will kind of help you, even though you will not get direct feedback. You will at least see the feedback for the essays that other people did. Did you manage to read the ones which I posted last night? Okay, so maybe we start with Jan Gregor then, because...
don't start with me. I'm halfway through the presentation. I just need a few minutes.
All right. Okay. So who submitted the strengths and weaknesses of the behavioral tracking? All right. Would you like to start?
I don't have a presentation like slides. I can talk.
Just talk about it. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So it kind of would be good if you. So how we will do it? Because if people don't see the text, can you open his essay on your laptops? Yeah, you all have laptops, so it should be fine. Yeah. So let's do it this way.
Hi everybody. My topic is quantified self projects, and like you see in front, there are 2 pages, 2 papers. I focus on the paper quantified self projects, so my essay is mainly based on that paper. And how I structured my essay is like I explained a little bit what are quantified self projects, how people started in the past with projects like this. So they started with tracking their habits in spreadsheets, they note something, and then they try to find out with this data how they can change their habits, or maybe there are some interesting points which they can find out. Now we have, in our area, we have a lot of devices which can track or gather data. So then I came to the point how we can get more data, effective data, semi-automated, and what we can do with this data. So small step from the past to now, and what people did so far. So I mentioned 2 very nice examples. There was a guy who made a project with himself and his coffee consumption, and he compared it to the concentration. So his idea was, or his hypothesis was, do coffee increase my concentration? So he did this experiment, and in the end he found out that coffee doesn't increase his concentration at all. So he stopped drinking coffee, or he's drinking coffee less. Another really nice project was to find out risk of diseases, and it was really interesting because it was a person with an identical twin. So she did this project and have an identical twin, so can really good compare. And after this project, I mentioned how or what are the interesting points or the useful points of quantified self projects. So I mentioned 3 points. The first one is it's beneficial for the person who starts this project. So you can track your health conditions and you can track your bad habits to get rid of them. So, I mean, in first, it's benefit for you if you start a quantified project. The next benefit is for medicine. So if you want to find out risk of diseases, or for example, you go to a doctor and you have headache, another person comes to a doctor and have headache, you will get the same treatment. But the cause of the headache maybe are different. And because of this quantified self project and the data which are different people collecting, you can find more reason for different problems. So here you have data which you can correlate with a lot of other data and a lot of different people to get more information on causes of problems or health problems. And the third point is like medical researchers are not familiar with data or processing data or gathering data or integrating data. And on the other side, data research scientists are not familiar with medical aspects. So I think it's also beneficial that these two groups get or have to work closer together to get more insights from, or the medical researchers get more insights from data, so they can use it as a tool. And on the other side, the data researchers have the possibility to find out, to get the meaning from data. So I think there are three really beneficial points which are connected to quantified self projects and the data of the, actually it's about the data. And in the list I have a short look at the questions which have to be asked if you want to increase the number of users or make a really make a product of this project. So, like, if you want to do it for more users, you have to think about its personalized data. So, where should it be stored? How should it be stored? Should it be stored like personal data or should it be anonymized? So there's a big issue in security, which we have to figure out, to think about. And the next point is the nature of people is to make progress. So if we have something like collecting data, process data, analyze data, the next step will to automate this and maybe make some predictions. So, and here it is interesting to find out, should it be used as a tool for a doctor, or should it be also used like you get a diagnosis from the system? So that's how my essay is built up. So a little bit historical. So what is quantified self? How we get data now? Then two projects from the past, and what I think is really beneficial, what we can get, or what we can learn from it, and some points which we have to talk about or to think about if you want to do a project, a product out of quantified projects.
Yep, thank you very much. So, any comments? It might be hard because you guys haven't read it, right? So, because I've chosen this one as the first one because I thought it had the least amount of comments I had actually.
Okay.
So, as you said, you have the structure kind of generally described. You have the introduction, the historical aspects, so sort of like an intro about what quantified self is. Then you present the two examples. And then you have a bit of a exploration of where it can lead, like the medical things. So you have some sort of thoughts. and then you kind of wrap it up, like you finish it, right? And it's kind of a clear structure. It's easy to follow, and it sort of describes what the intention was, and it's done on on 2 pages, 1.5 pages, with the 2 examples being referenced. So it's kind of clean and tidy. It's probably short. You could probably go a little bit more in depth in some of the areas. You could give more examples, or you could give more sort of support for the claims that you make, because generalizing just 1 example per each is hard to make a strong claim that, yeah, that is how the world works. But overall, it's kind of very tidy, very short, and very well organized, right? So I thought it's a kind of an example of things could be improved. Of course, they could be more. It could be longer and a little bit more in depth. But it's kind of a short but crisp and kind of well done, right? Some small comments. There is a title, but there is no author and no date, right? So you kind of need to put that in. Another small comment is that we try always to be precise. So when we use things like some years ago or in the era of Internet of Things, it's okay, but it's a little bit imprecise. Like when we read it today, it makes sense. But if someone reads it in 40 years' time, it's like a little bit not clear what that era is, what we're talking about. So when you're using time, or if you're using some pointers in time, don't say nowadays, don't say, few years ago, just say when. Just say between 2005 and 2010 or something like this. So try to be precise, because we hope our stuff is going to be read in 40 years time, and then nowadays in 40 years time doesn't make sense, right? So try to be, and it also relates to time, but it also relates to anything you write. So don't say very, don't say etc. Be precise. What do you mean exactly? So apart from that, I thought that that's it. Like, I don't actually have a lot of comments for this one. So I thought it was kind of an example of a short piece which was sort of well organized. Could be improved, of course. You could, as I'm saying, I felt some of the claims were you have examples, but it's only 2 examples, and making kind of a general claim that, okay, it's good for medicine because those 2 people did that, is a kind of a bit of a leap, right? Yeah, but apart from that, it's kind of all good. So some suggestions there. Thanks. All right, so what we will do for this to be probably more productive is, those are, as I'm saying, kind of short to read. So let's read the augmented reality on mobile phones now. It's also reasonably short. It's like a little bit over a page. And then we talk a little bit about that one, okay? So let's have like 3 minutes. Everybody will read it, and then we, do we have a person who wrote that one here?
No, it's not about it. It's not well.
Okay, so let's just read it, and then I will discuss it, okay, instead of the person. Finished? Okay, so let's start with a little bit of aesthetics. So I was actually surprised with the graphics because I envisioned everybody will just write text, right? So seeing a graphics, I was like, wow, I didn't predict that to happen. So question to the class, do we want to have graphics in essays or just plain text? Because, you know, I actually didn't thought about it, like using graphs or using graphics in the essay itself. So we can just make a rule that just no graphics, yeah?
I think figures and stuff like that is fine as long as they contribute to the points and the thoughts that the author expresses in the essay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in this case, it's just a title.
It's kind of aesthetics page, yeah. So, I mean, it's not wrong. It's just like I didn't thought about it, like how we will treat it, right? Because the submission system like doesn't actually have the ability to have things like this, right? Unless we do it in PDF form, that we kind of submitting PDF. Because I was thinking more of a just straight text with comments kind of thing. So
how would you do formatting with just text?
Well, you wouldn't, yeah.
So not even graphs, figure or something.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a bit limiting, right? Yeah. So it's up to you. I mean, what do you feel? Like, because it should be a kind of a rule for everybody. Like, if you want to have graphs, that's fine. But if we say no graphs, then nobody uses graphs, right? So I'm agnostic. I'm fine. I'm fine even with the aesthetics. But if we do things like this, then we have to say submissions are in PDF format, and then you just prepare the PDF, right? And submit the PDF, and people have to use a PDF reader or something to read it. If it's plain text, it can be anything because I can reformat the text myself and put title and put the references myself if it's just plain text. But I'm fine. So who would like to use figures in the essay? Yep. So let's have figures. Who would like to use aesthetic elements like this one? So let's say no aesthetic elements. So only elements which contribute to the matter at hand. That's fine. I like the front page because it has the title, the author, and so on. So it's kind of well organized there. So that's good. A comment about formatting. So if you do the paragraphs and you justify it to the left and right kind of edge of text, it feels kind of more tidy, right? So you can justify the text on both ends. And some of the articles were doing it. Like this one has the text nicely arranged here and nicely arranged there, right? So you can do that as well. And then the text feels a little bit more tidy. Okay, so that's about the aesthetics and about sort of style. Maybe one more comment. So the person here used the captions, like introduction, main, and conclusions. You don't have to do that, right? And they don't really contribute a lot here. But I was sort of thinking this is more like a first draft. It's not really an essay yet. It's sort of a bit of a brain dump of what would you like to include, what would go into introduction, what would go in the main part, and what would go in the conclusions. And then keeping the headings is fine. When you actually have the final piece, maybe you just remove the headings, like you just have the flow of text like in the previous example. You don't, for a short piece like that, you don't need to structure it more than just have a block of text, right? If your piece becomes a bit longer, then structuring it and giving hints of what is what makes sense. But for short piece, it's not necessary. So as I'm saying, I don't think it's kind of a done essay yet, but it's a good example of like a very first draft. You just dump on paper some of your thoughts, some of the ideas, and then the next step would be to tidy it up, right? So one suggestion I have is that some of the things which are in main part are easier introduced than the things that are in the introduction. Introduction is very dense. It throws a lot of ideas right into the reader, and it doesn't introduce actually anything. It just throws a lot of stuff at you. And then some of the things which are in main are more gentle. They kind of describe how certain things happen. And maybe you can kind of use that. So you can introduce some things first and then have the part which is currently introduction actually in the final part where you expand the kind of the point of view, right? So you could do that. The other comment I had was that it has a lot of ideas. It is very dense. It's a lot of different things, and that's okay. Like for the very first draft, that's fine. But now it's the difficult part because you probably should focus on like 2-3 things. You should pick 2-3 things out of all of this and focus on that and remove the other bits, right? So I don't know whether we discussed it in this class, but I think we discussed it in serious games that you have to kill your darlings. So sometimes you have to remove stuff that you already wrote, but it's like go sideways. It's not directly related to the topic at hand, so you basically have to remove it, right? And it's painful. Like you already wrote this paragraph, and now you have to delete it. It's like that kind of feels bad, right? But you have to do that to improve the quality of your writing. You have to be critical of what contributes to the topics you discuss and what doesn't, and then you just need to remove the things that don't contribute directly to the topic at hand, right? So I kind of like this because it demonstrates how you start. It's not a tidy essay. It's actually quite a messy collection of ideas, and now you have to tidy it up. You have to select 2 or 3 things out of this, focus on that, explore them a little bit more, and remove everything else, right? So it's a kind of a draft of the first iteration, and then you kind of work on it. So that's what I have, and I basically said that it's too many ideas in a short space. You need to focus and pick 2 or 3 ideas and explore them in more detail. And then you have to introduce the reader a little bit more gently to certain things. So if you're introducing certain terms or certain technologies, we all know what HoloLens is. But if my mom reads this, it would be like she would not understand almost anything from this essay, right? I mean, from this draft, because she doesn't know any of these technologies. And if we already know all of those technologies, then this essay doesn't bring anything new in a sense. You have to kind of be a little bit more selective, a little bit more gentle for introducing things, but also a little bit more specific of what is that you want to say, right? So yeah, overall, good start. Needs probably 2 or 3 iterations on top of that to sort of tidy things up, and then the conclusions were missing at all. So so for the reference list, you don't need to make those first 2, especially if you don't really want to use the graphics. So you don't need to tell the reader of where the template came from. In the references, it's kind of okay if you don't say that. It's fine. And then the rest of the references are mostly blog posts and kind of short articles, which makes it it's fine for a blog post, but it's a little bit harder for a piece to be taken seriously as a kind of a contribution to something. So at least one article or two, sort of with peer-reviewed content, would be helpful, right? So it's fine to use blog posts and kind of manuals and references, but you need something extra as well. So you need to kind of bring at least one or two scientific articles into the picture and use them as evidence for what you're kind of trying to say. So with the title being augmented reality on mobile phones, I felt also a little bit of a mismatch that talking a lot about HoloLens is not really about the topic, right? So the topic is how, I don't know, I mean, augmented reality on mobile phones, right? So I would say that essay will be about something to do with augmented reality on mobile phones. So you probably have to constrain yourself a little bit to that, or change the topic, that you're talking more about HoloLens and more about, sort of situated augmented reality. And Vive wasn't mentioned. So I thought also, if you're kind of talking about HoloLens, you need to mention Vive. But yeah, anyway, it was kind of a good example of how you basically start the process, right? Do you have any other comments? Yeah.
How subjective should we be in our essays?
You can be as subjective as you want.
Okay.
You can be ridiculously subjective.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's fine. Actually, the more subjective you are, the better.
Okay.
Because that's what you bring from yourself, right? You actually don't repeat the kind of the echo chamber of everybody else is saying something. You say, oh, I think this, and it may be very controversial, and that's good. Like that's what you think, and that's what you bring the evidence for, right? So the more subjective and controversial you are, the better actually. Yeah. Okay, so that's that one. As I'm saying, it's not to be discussed as an essay yet. It's sort of work in progress, and that's what we're doing here. So, okay, so then I thought we could discuss Håkon. Do you have a presentation or to? All right, so let's read augmented reality as a collaboration tool. That one is a little bit longer, so let's have like 5 minutes checking that one out, and then yeah, and Håkon will have a short break before his talk. And I will bring that document for the online viewers. So we can check with Håkon, but it was named version 3, so it looks like a third iteration of the draft. do you want me to put your essay on Jan Kruger into the folder as well?
Yeah, I have shared a link with everyone in the class.
But not with me though.
I can send it to you on Skype.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
And you can comment directly into it if you want to save time.
Is it doc? Google
Yeah,
Doc?
good.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Welcome. Ready? Let's do it.
Yeah, so I guess you all have read it by now, so I'm not sure actually how to do the presentation right now, but I think talk a little bit about the idea of the essay. I'm trying to have a bit of as Marius likes to call it, a chatty style, since it's an essay and not a technical report or something like that. So I start by introducing what augmented reality is, for those who doesn't know that. And then I come to what the essay is all about. That collaboration is an area where augmented reality can shine. And I'm going to look into that. Then I talk a little bit about normal ways of doing collaboration, like face-to-face and remote. And then I go on about key concepts and advantages of augmented reality. And examples of these used in both health and education. I'm thinking about swapping the health one to another one where they actually have images projected onto the patient on the table, which is going under surgery. Then I talk a little bit about a possibility, which isn't quite yet there, but probably will be in the future, like the meeting example, where they can use, for example, teleimmersion technology. Then I try to wrap up the main part with different problems that augmented reality has in different areas, and start with end with a conclusion that AI is probably not as good as the current technology, or is not as good as current technology, but with the way things are advancing right now, it's probably there soon.
Okay. Comments, feelings. Did you like it? So say he will be happy if you say.
Yeah, I think it was quite nice essay. It was well structured, and yeah, I think it was good actually.
You see, it's not that hard. Yeah, I thought it was good as well. Minor things. So again, at the time of writing, you can avoid that. Some little tweaks, some little things to kind of correct, but overall it was good. The only thing overall I felt you could do a little bit better is the title is Augmented Reality as a Collaboration Tool, and you spend some time talking about features of augmented reality in general, like accuracy and so on, which is fine, but you don't link it up to the collaboration aspects, right? So you spend, for example, a paragraph talking about depth perception, color and contrast, and so on, and it's like, okay, what is the relationship to the collaboration? Does it hinder the collaboration, or so linking it a little bit more to the topic at hand would help, but overall it's fine. Like, you don't diverge too much, you sort of keep it rather close on target, with the collaboration being the main theme
Sometimes you go a little bit sideways about generic AR, but it's okay. You kind of have to do it, but like linking it back to the collaboration would kind of help. Some things, yeah, so it's unavoidable to do mental jumps, right? So we cannot explain like really step by step everything from the beginning of what augmented reality is to kind of convey our meaning. So we do certain mental jumps. So you sort of, because surgery itself is not really collaborative in a sense. I mean, you have a surgeon and
Well, we can too.
exactly. So you could explore it a little bit more, right? So I know it's like this, that there are more people kind of helping out and working, but you don't sort of say it, right? It's like the reader has to imagine that, right? So some things you kind of it's unavoidable to use mental jumps, but sometimes you have to ask, is that okay, or should I sort of say a little bit more about how this setup is actually collaborative, that there are multiple people participating in the surgery and so on, because I had to imagine it, like, because the first time I read it, I was like, yeah, but it's like one guy operating on a liver, and it's like, well, what's the link to the collaboration? And then I have to sort of have a narration in my head, kind of imagining how it actually relates to the topic at hand. And you should give me hints. You should kind of guide me a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So some mental jumps are too big, and then you should shorten them. So you should sort of put a little bit of hints. But overall, same. I quite liked it. I thought it was well structured, good choices of examples, good choices of references, and it was all the hard concepts were kind of gently introduced. So it was no big jumps in that sense, that my mom reading that article would sort of understand the gist of it, right? How the technology is actually used for those things. So overall, yeah, it's fine. Any other comments? Great. So here is your reward. We've read red pen. So Nikita, yeah, would you like to talk about your ones? Did you read his one as well, or you didn't read yet? Okay, so can you read that one now? It's again not very long, like 2 or 3 minutes will be enough. I will open it for the remote people. Yeah, one more comment about Håkon's article. Like you noticed, he used
two different ways of referencing. So sometimes you have paragraph, 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 final dot, and the reference, or you have blah, 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 a reference, and the end of sentence like this, right? So we kind of do that. So this one means the reference is only for the sentence, and this one means the reference is for the whole paragraph, right? So we sometimes put dot behind the reference, or put dot before space, and then the reference referring to the entire paragraph. And sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it isn't, right? So you have to be mindful to kind of control that, to do it right. So if you're referencing something you just said in the sentence, then you put dot after. If you're referencing, well, you were talking about some concepts, and then you want to reference all those things from multiple sentences because you have multiple things here, then you put it at the end. And it usually is at the end of the paragraph, and then you have a new paragraph starting, right? So then this reference is for the entire paragraph. It feels a little bit odd if you have a paragraph, and then you have a dot, you have a reference, and you continue that paragraph. You should never do that, right? Because then it's like, oh, is it, right? It's kind of, if you have it in the middle of the paragraph, you should probably reference it as part of the sentence. And then if it is about the paragraph, you probably should start the next paragraph as a new paragraph, right, after. So kind of, if I see something like this, it's confusing. So try to avoid that. Yeah.
What about, for example, as considered by bracket source 1, bracket, comma, blah, blah, blah?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's perfect, yeah. Some people don't like, so if you do that with this type of referencing with numbers, some people, you should say as considered by name, comma, blah, blah, blah. So you should not say as considered by 1, because that looks weird a little bit, that you're referring to a number as a person, right? So some reviewers say, just put the author name here. So put the name of the author of that article there, and then put the citation. So then visually the reader can jump, okay, that's the guy, right? And then instead of making a mental note of a number, they make a mental note of the name. And that's why in some fields and in computer science as well, you often have the citations being done in the author date format instead of numbers. So you say by name, comma, date, and that becomes actually the citation, which is referenced later on by name, date, bibliography, right? So I actually prefer that citation style more, because then you can use it in text and you naturally use the name of the author, comma, date as a referencing style. And if you're doing a reference like that, you would put it in brackets, and if you're doing it in text, you would do it without brackets, right? And then it kind of reads nicely, because you would say, as name 2015, comma, blah, 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 right? You would have it kind of nicely visually flowing. But again, it depends on where you're publishing it. It's more about the format of the journal that you're submitting to and so on. So they try to make it consistent. But if you have a preference, you can sort of make your own preference. And in this particular case, my personal preference is to use name, date kind of referencing style. And that it's easier to reference it in the text. Yeah, yes?
And if I want to put on myself some definition, should I, and I make a reference after this definition, should I, if I use it like directly word by word, put quotes?
That's right.
If I, or just rephrase by my own words?
So it depends. Most of the time, if you have to repeat somebody else's statement, and they actually precisely said what you want to say, then you use quotes. So you just repeat it and put quotes around it and just cite it like this. So you kind of put the reference as a citation. But sometimes they said something, but you think they haven't highlighted that element that you want to highlight, so you may paraphrase it.
and then if you paraphrase it, then you don't put quotes around. It's like your own reproduction of what the main gist was, but you saying it in your own words. Then you don't put quotes, and then you can put reference at the end. Of course, there is a bit of a gray area, because if you paraphrase it too much and you put emphasis on what they didn't put emphasis, and then you cite them, that's a little bit pushing. Like they didn't really say what you're really saying, but you're still citing them as if they said that. So then it's a little bit, you have to judge it yourself, like how much you deviate from the original idea, right? So if you just put emphasis on something yourself, then you just make a citation without quotes. If you want to say exactly what they said, just copy it, put quotes around it, and that's fine. Yeah. And if you want to contrast it, like you want to say, if you want to say something which refers to what they said, but it's really kind of a little bit different or a little bit like contrasty, then make sure that the reader understands that the citation is not for what you're saying, but for the source of what you're contrasting it with, right? So you try to be kind of clear about what you're really citing. So that's also, it is hard because sometimes you want to, like, if you cite a book, right? So you read a book, and the book has a lot of good ideas, and you sort of, using some of the ideas, and then you make, you're citing a book. But for the reader, that's really not that helpful. Like, if the book has 600 pages, it's like, that's great. You make sure that it's not you're saying, it's like you're referring to a book, but it's like too much. I mean, I don't know exactly what you're really referring to by doing the reference, right? So sometimes it's better to not refer to books, but to find something smaller, like an article or a paper, which talks only about a single idea. And then that makes kind of easier for the reader to know what you really want to talk about, right?
But we can refer to chapters or sections.
You can, or you can refer to a page, exactly. So if you cannot find a paper which talks about that exact idea, then you have to do this. You have to refer to a chapter or to even a page of the book. But what I mean is sometimes it's very easy for the reader to open the paper and read an abstract and get an idea what you're really talking about. Whereas if you're referring to a book page, it's still a little bit hard to actually know. Then normally what should happen is you describe it a little bit in your own words, what that book page contains. So you can, as you were saying, put quotes around it and put a bit of a citation in the text, or just explain a little bit more of what you mean by that reference. If you're referring to a paper, then that's fine, because everybody can quickly read the abstract of the paper or browse through the paper. But if the piece becomes bigger, or if the idea is not as easily referenceable, then you just describe it a little bit. Yeah. So especially like if I write something about Java and I refer to JVM, specification, it's like, I don't remember, like 500 pages. And that's great, but what exactly you're referring to? Why, you have to be quite precise. So often you have to say exactly what you mean, what the reader should look up. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the smartphone sensing.
I can tell a little bit about paper that I read in my essay. It was two papers. One used smartphones, mobile devices as a sensing device to detect falls. They developed applications that can be used by old people. That if they will fall, it will notify their relatives or like doctors, and it can be easily identified. They discussed some problems that they faced with accessibility
that interface should be simple for old people and stuff like that. And also about detection accuracy and how they made claims about the precision of this falling detection. And another paper was about application called Park Sense. In this paper, authors developed applications that the main purpose of it is to track when driver of the car returned to the car and free parking spot. Authors claim that 30% of city traffic generated by cruising cars that are just looking for a free spot to park in, and that reducing this, showing drivers where is the free place to park, they can reduce this traffic then. And what their main contribution was that they used Wi-Fi spots, beacons, to track driver and when he starts to drive. And another approach methods would be used to GPS or some other kind of location systems, and they tell that their system consumes much less energy than other ones. So in my paper, I was trying to formalize and describe a little bit problems that developers and researchers can face with, because smartphone sensing is quite a what is called like controversial area of study and area of applications, and it has a couple of problems that should be considered, and also potential of this kind of technology.
Yep. Comments? Yes?
I really like the style of it. It's easily read.
Say it again?
It's easily read, so I like the
Yeah.
style of it.
So the style was good. It is a little bit similar to the first one we discussed, also like giving examples and then discussing a little bit more some of the implications. What else can you say about the paper?
I find it odd to have etc. as the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that there are some other problems that I can dismiss.
So my supervisor told me that every time your reviewer reads etc., they read it like, and now I have no clue what to write about. Right?
Yeah.
So you should basically avoid it. And that's exactly what you said, right? I didn't have clue what to write, so I wrote etc., right?
But there are some possible problems.
There are some other ones,
yeah.
but you basically just don't do it, right? Just don't write that last bullet point.
Just say that this list is some of them.
Yeah, it's a non-exhaustive list.
Yeah.
Or those are examples, yeah, if you want to keep it a little bit open. Yep.
What I want to ask is the idea of the paper is clear enough in the beginning. I haven't stated like I will discuss this and this in this paper. Is it clear enough for what I'm writing about?
Yeah. So what do you think?
Somewhat, you have to go quite far before you actually get the gist of it. Or I thought that way.
Because probably if you haven't read title of the paper, it's hard to say probably. But I don't know if title is enough to
Yeah, so the title is a very good hint of what you're writing about, and it kind of biases the reader, right? So it's a good way of directing attention of the reader to what you want the attention to be at. And I also thought the bullet points where you listed all the challenges is very good. It sort of makes a kind of a very tidy way of saying all those are challenges, right? I kind of missed similar thing for all the opportunities, right? So you provided like examples of where the technology was used and where it was beneficial, but there were like 2 examples, and compared to the 7 or so points of difficulties, it felt a little bit unbalanced. That you did for challenges a little bit more structured kind of evaluation, but for opportunities only picked 2 as a demonstration, but didn't do a little bit of a step back and kind of listed all the potential opportunities, right? Which you could. So it's like for the opportunities you did a little bit specific, and for challenges you did a little bit more general and sort of better structured. But I mean, it is okay. Like you have both opportunities and challenges in a sense, right?
But can we use, because I thought actually that we can use only papers that we are mentioned that we will use, and I can't use some other sources.
You can use other sources, yeah.
As examples of, for example, this one is sensitive.
That's right. You can use other papers, and that's fine in the essay. It's just that we want 1 or 2 papers for everybody to read, but for the essay you can reference other papers to make your case, and that's fine. So overall, I thought it's fine. It's a little bit similar to the other article, that you have some small examples and you try to generalize it to kind of a bigger things. And in your case, you try to structure it. And you did quite well for the challenges because you listed them and then you kind of discussed them. For the opportunities, you only stayed within the examples. You could do similar thing. You could list some of the opportunities, like, geolocations, real-time, networked, and blah, 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 and sort of dive a little bit into them. But, well, it's kind of your choice. I have a couple of comments which are, yeah, reasonably, style-based. So the first one is about the title. So you said smartphone sensing, dot, big potential and possible problems, no dot. So for consistency, you have to put the dot there, right? And we try to make titles without dots. So how could you convert it into a title which doesn't have any dots? You could simply change the first dot into the column, and that's fine, right? So when you say big potential, do you need to say that? What's the difference between small potential and big potential, right? If you use the word big, then you have to explain yourself and say, yeah, those are kind of small potential and those are big potential. So maybe get rid of big, right? And then if you say potential and possible problems, we know the problems are not necessarily inherent. So you could kind of get rid of possible as well, right? So you could simplify the title by removing all those unnecessary vague words. Yeah. Because if you say possible problems, then it begs questions of how possible they are. So you have to quantify, okay, this is very likely to happen, that's not as likely, and those are almost not possible, and those are possible, and so on. So you get into this area of which you don't want to talk about, right? So maybe get rid of the possible as well. So that's, as I'm saying, that's kind of aesthetics and a little bit of clarity in specifying the title. The second one is, if you read, we discussed nowadays already, so you try to remove it, but even if you don't read nowadays, and you read the first paragraph, so you say, smartphones become a big part of our lives. That's your first sentence. This developing market grows each year. Comparing the third quarter, you provide some data. As a result, more and more people carrying mobile phones with them all the time. This fact opens a way for things, right? So this is kind of a little bit cultural, but the main point here is that a lot of people carry their phones all the time with them, and that opens up the opportunities, right? The first two sentences are not about that. The first two sentences are about background to that main thing, right? So you have you have this this plus potentially this leads to this, which is my important thing, right? And you write like this, right? So in some cultures we write like this. In Polish we also write like this. In Norwegian you feel I feel like you write like this. But in English you don't like this. In English you say, look at this big thing, which is because of those three things. You start with that, and then you say why that's important and why this is the case. So you start with this first, and then you say why, or you say because of this, or whatever. Yeah? So you say, people are carrying phones all the time these days because we have this growth, right? And that opens the opportunities. So you sort of, it's not a very big deal, but if you read an English essay, you can notice that they sort of tell you what first and then why later. They don't say why and then what at the end, right? So it makes reading a little bit easier because you don't need to think too much. You've been given the the answer straight away, and then why it is the answer, right? So you can turn it around. You can start because the first sentence is kind of the strongest thing that you say in your essay, right? And your first sentence is about smartphones become a big part of people's lives, but that's fine. But it's a little bit not exactly what you want to say. You want to say that people are carrying phones all the time with them, and that's because and this is the big part of their life, and the rest of the facts is kind of secondary. So you can kind of twist it around and say the main thing that you want to say first, and then say the other things as a follow-up, right? So that's I said here rewrite the first paragraph to turn it around a little bit, which would make the message much stronger, and it would make a reader sort of jump into your train of thought much easier. Like it's basically what an English reader would kind of expect. Otherwise, it's a bit confusing because I'm reading smartphones become big of people's life. Great, I get it. But then you talk about the market growth, and I still don't know what the paper will be about. Is the paper about market growth, or is about, so you have to make it kind of explicit. The other thing is, and I did that mistake a lot, I use the round brackets around things that I want to kind of hint the reader, right? It's kind of tempting to say a sentence and then put a round bracket about some kind of auxiliary concepts that you want to say. And you do that, for example, for GPS, and that's fine. So you say location, brackets, GPS, right? That's perfectly fine, but you do it earlier as well. You say mobile devices can be considered as a universal, brackets programmable, right? Why do you need those brackets? They are programmable, set of sensors. You can get rid of the brackets entirely and make it a part of the sentence.
Yeah.
So try to avoid brackets. I mean, sometimes it's fine. Like with the GPS, it's short and it's clean and it's like just obvious. But sometimes we do that as a sort of a second thought, right? So you have a main thought in the sentence, and then in the brackets you kind of give sort of extra things. Try not to do that. And in fact, in this particular sentence, I think if you just say programmable set of sensors, that would be much cleaner. Because if you said universal, I was like not sure what you mean by universal. And then you have to explain yourself. But if you just say can be considered as a programmable set of sensors, that's kind of naturally clean and obvious, and that's fine, right? So small syntactic things, and that's it. I felt it's again quite well structured and sort of easy to follow. Short, you can dive a little bit more. You could do a little bit more with the opportunities.
Yeah.
Maybe have a short bullet list for opportunities as well, why they are the way they are. But overall, it's kind of fun. Yeah. Yes?
You wrote in your essay, for example, in following detection application, device connects with remote service using secure protocol SSL, ensuring that the data can't be read by someone else. And I sort of stopped there for a moment, and I think that it would be more appropriate to kind of abstract it a bit more and not say SSL in specific, but for example, refer to encryption. So it does not have to be SSL in particular that's implemented in order to restrict data communication from being observed by someone else. And I also think it's kind of a bit controversial to say that the data can't be read by someone else, since that means that nobody else, that just you and the server are able to observe the connection. Well, NSA most likely can, if they want to, right?
Well, but yeah, the main idea of
Yeah.
this kind of connections that nobody else.
Yeah, but I think it would be kind of better to say that it's harder for someone else to.
Harder?
Yeah.
But SSL is the protocol they used in this paper. That's why.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why I said that, for example, in this, they said that they used it.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a good point, that some things are kind of specific for the examples that you've given, but you could generalize it a little bit more. Because another aspect I was thinking was, Facebook uses SSL as well. Everything I send to Facebook is protected, like nobody can read it yet. Millions of companies read my data anyway because Facebook sells it to them, right? So the concept of privacy is not just SSL, it's also what happens at the server side, who owns the data. So you didn't mention, for example, the client-side encryption, that I have stored something on the server, but nobody else but me can read it because it's encrypted with the key only I have, right? For example. So a bit of a nuance, but in the discussion on privacy, that is kind of important, how it actually happens.
Yeah. I just say generally that you should consider how you collect, store, and transmit.
That's right. Yeah, you did say that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. So you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready now.
Everybody read his paper?
No.
Okay. So can you read it now, please?
Did you post it on Dropbox?
It's on Skype.
It's a Google Doc.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We have to work on Hakan. He smokes too much. Come on, some peer pressure.
You should do
Oh, so stressed
25
out.
self-project.
Yeah, exactly.
How much time he spends on
How much money he spends on the cigarettes. Cigarettes are so expensive in Norway. It makes no sense to smoke here.
They have the tax studies because they incur more healthcare penalties.
Yeah, that's right.
Compensate for it.
They did a kind of a big campaign in New Zealand a few years back. So they ramp up the taxes for tobacco, and they also make a lot of commercials about the badness of smoking. And it kind of worked. So people, almost nobody in New Zealand smokes actually. So you can rarely see people like smoking on the street or in, and they introduced the law that in public places you're not supposed to smoke. You only can smoke in designated spaces. So, universities and so on became off limits, same as most public spaces.
Because it's a health hassle.
It is secondary smoke. You know, there is also a third smoking. So if someone smokes and you inhale their fumes, it's a secondary. But if someone smokes in a room and the nicotine gets into the room or in the car, and then you go in, and they're not actually there smoking anymore, but you still get the nicotine from the furniture and from the carpets and so on, that's called, you know, thirdary effects. So because they made it illegal for people to smoke in cars, because their claim was that even if you don't have a kit in the car right now when you smoke, when the kit is in the car later, they will still get the effects. They will still get the nicotine in their bloodstream.
I would say it's even worse than that because it goes in the same line as texting while driving.
Yeah. So that was a little bit controversial. That you know, smoking in cars is harmful, even if you don't have a passenger right there driving with you. You know? So, do you feel you need any training to judge a good essay from bad essay? So, if you read essays, two, say, side by side, and one is really bad and one is really good, would you have difficulty finding out which one is the good one?
As long as we can I know what you want in an essay,
yeah,
you have different opinions on what a good essay is.
I know, but do you have, like, if you're reading somebody else's essays, some essays you like and some you don't like, right? Did you kind of train yourself to like certain types of essays, or it kind of comes naturally? You sort of, I think it comes naturally, right? It's sort of easy to judge somebody else's essays that, oh yeah, this is a really good piece, or oh no, this one is kind of not that good. But it's hard to make a good one yourself, right? It's kind of really hard to pay attention to all those elements which make a good essay yourself to make a good essay. Even though judging a good essay as good is kind of trivial, like you read it and it's like, yeah, this is brilliant. It's a really well written good essay, right? It's kind of a little bit the same with photographs. If you see a really well done photograph, you sort of appreciate it that it's good. And then if you see a bad one, you kind of know that it's a bad one. But taking a good one is also hard. It's sort of, you have to learn about composition, you have to learn about the light, you have to learn about how the kind of viewer's eyes follow the photograph, and so on. So like consciously take a good photograph is not trivial. They say if you take 1,000 photographs, at least 2 will be brilliant, no matter who you are, right? So you can compete with the highly skilled professionals. I'm not sure if it's the same with essays. Like if you wrote 1,000 essays, at least 2 will be brilliantly written. It may not happen, right? So for writing good essays, you kind of have to pay attention to certain things. You have to pay attention to those elements that we kind of are discussing now. And when you're reading or discussing somebody else's essay, try to pin down what exactly made it a good one, or what you really liked and why, or why you didn't like it, right? Kind of make a kind of a conscious reflection on your own perceptions of somebody else's writing, yeah.
But is it not connected to the topic of the essay? I mean, if I read a topic which is really uninteresting for me, but the essay is maybe brilliant, I'm not really...
To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent, you will be biased by the topic which is not relevant to you, even though the essay might be really good. You may still not really enjoy reading it, yeah. That is true. But even then, you can still kind of appreciate the professionalism or the quality of writing, even if you're reading something which is not in the area of your interest. Yeah. The good ones are able to engage you even if it's not the area of your interest. So they kind of do it in such a way that even if you're not interested in a topic, they kind of still make you read to the end, and they still make you kind of, appreciate it. But that's hard. All right, and Gregor.
Actually, I have a presentation. It's supposed to be HDMI.
Great. Yeah. So you can. There is an HDMI cable. You can hook yourself up, and we can fire the projector.
Cool. All right.
This is the most awkward tripod I ever used.
Yeah. Try to move this a bit. A little short. Right, just to clarify, I wrote half my essay in a car with no internet. That's why it's kind of a lot of spelling errors, like you probably saw, Jakob. Okay, so my topic is mobile revenue, which is really interesting to me personally because, like, you can make an amazing app, but unless you know how to make money out of it, it kind of doesn't matter in the long run. You have to make a living, you have to earn money in order to survive. So this is, in some ways, at least for me personally, the most important field if you ever do anything within, everything, but in this sense, inside mobile. Did anyone actually read some of the reference papers and the blog? Yeah, of course you have read it. I'm going to give a short overview of them. You don't really need to know them. So on mobile, there's in general 3 different ways of making a living, different ways of earning money with your application. The oldest one, sort of, I couldn't really find any data on this, but I think the oldest one, at least, is the advertising based, where you just include some kind of advertising showing up in between sessions, in the bottom of the screen, or somewhere at any time, just enticing people to click on them. But then again, advertising work on the basis that some users have to click on them, and it's the click-through rate, which is how many people click on them compared to how many people that actually see them. And that's kind of low. You don't make too much money with that kind of approach. The other one, which is the most used earlier, was the upfront price, where you just open the App Store, it says 15 kroner to buy this, and you purchase it. That's it. Nothing more. The app is yours. And the last one, which has been included more in the recent years, is the in-app purchase, where at some point, when using that, you can purchase additional items. The oldest example probably is like you can remove advertising for like a few dollars. But the newer ones is that you can buy sort of in-game items, DLC, expansions, stuff like that. Of course, you can also say that it's a fourth one where it's sort of getting funding from government organizations and stuff like that. And a lot of developers actually need that to survive, especially in Norway. So the first one I looked at was Game Oven. Anyone know who they are? They went out of business, so you never will hear from them again, probably. But it was a recommendation by Marius last year, which people should play the games. A really interesting approach, but that's not what I'm looking at. They made a game studio in Netherlands and tried to make a living making games for iOS and Android. And it worked kind of, but they ran into a big problem. Several of them, actually. One of them being that they had a really hard time being creative while they always had to just keep up with the money flow. Like, you have an amazing idea, you develop an amazing app, you make a lot of money. Well, enough money to survive for some time at least. But the problem is then you have a downtime before you can get your next application out, before you even have the idea. And most of the studio's money was burned at that time. And staying creative on top of that is really hard. The other major problem they had was piracy. At the highest amount, 98% of their active sessions was a pirate user, pirates. And I'm getting back to that data later to show you where in the world they are concentrated. So in the end, they sort of closed the studio. I think it was last year around this time, due to these factors of a slightly too low income, but more on the part of not achieving to survive from app to app in a creative process with everything going on. So here is the data they showed us. Of course, they could have modified it, but I do believe it's true. And we can see here that Bound on Android has an insanely 98% piracy rate. But another interesting thing you can see here, which seems to be consistent among different kind of pirated applications, is that most pirates are not from around here. Most pirates are from Russia, China, and countries along those areas, and can be due to many different factors. Like, for example, in China, there's a lot of a restricted market where not everybody can sell their application, and the economy is not as good, so people don't have the same buying power. And another few reasons I'm going to get back to a bit later. So, also, in addition, has anyone played, for example, Monument Valley? It's a really amazing game, you should try it, but that has exactly the same piracy rate on Android, with an insane amount of piracy. And that sort of forces, you can see here that the iOS piracy is a lot lower. It's really high still, But this can be one of the reasons that a lot of games come out on iOS first, because it's a lower piracy rate. And publishing on Android can actually make them lose a lot of money. Now, the main paper I read about was an empirical study on the effects of different mechanisms on piracy. It's a really quick and interesting read if you want to look into this, because to be honest, it was the only thing I found, and it came out this year. So it was really, really hard to find. In the paper, they sort of looked at the South Korean market and sort of using different applications measured how different ways of handling piracy affected the number of pirates, the amount of piracy. And like apps in general have a piracy rate of between 60 and 90%, which is far higher than movies, games, like normal games, computer-based console. And it's really hard for every developer. It's something every developer has to sort of look into. And I looked at 4 different approaches to this, where the first was that having a higher price on the product, like pricing your app at 500 kroner, nobody's going to buy that. Everybody's going to pirate it. And they found a correlation there, a positive effect, where increasing the price drastically increased the piracy. This effect is measured down to like $1 to $2, which is a really low amount, but I'm probably getting back to that later. I also saw that utility apps like Flashlight, Messenger, you're not technically purchasing those, but apps that are not games have an even higher effect, where it seems they are sort of arguing that because you're using it for entertainment purposes, you're willing to purchase more expensive apps when they are games compared to just need them to do something, which seems reasonable. The third one was a bit of a surprise, and that is they sort of thought that having in-app purchases would decrease piracy because they didn't have to pay something up front to get that, and it was optional to pay the in-app purchases. They actually saw an increase in piracy when they were using in-app purchases, which is kind of surprising because a lot of developers, and actually I think Google and Apple also said that they sort of wanted people to use more of in-app purchases because they thought it would decrease piracy, which they actually proven that it doesn't. And the last one is also kind of interesting, is that, and that's an old approach, like you have an app, it costs 50 kroner, does something amazing, but nobody's going to buy it just like that. So you include a free version with limited functionality. You can use it for a limited time, or you can use all the functionality. And then if they like it, they can buy the full version. That actually works. Having that decreases piracy. It seems like people really want to try out something before they actually buy it, which seems really reasonable. Demos have been around for a long, long time. So there's a lot of things that are wrong with the mobile revenue area right now. It's kind of hard to make a living, and then it gets a bit colder. That either you make a little money, just barely surviving, not at all, or you're making a lot of money. Like Supercell, the ones who have made Clash of Clans, they're making over $2 million a day on their app. That's just insane. Almost $1 billion a year. And then we have on the other side, like Game Over, just barely making a living. And most apps getting far below that. A lot of applications getting released all the time, and either you win quickly or you lose fast. And it's sort of sad because, especially on Android, it's really easy to pirate. Piracy and websites where you can pirate apps is insanely easy to do, especially on Android. And that just leads to it actually being easier sometimes to pirate than to be legal, and that's one of the major problems here facing piracy. And another problem is that well, money talks. If you go into Google Play and look at top charts, a lot of them is based on how much that is making. And of course they want that. Like 30% of every cent made on the app just goes right into the App Store, Google Play or the iOS Store. So of course they want apps that are making a lot of money. But the problem is most of them right now is free to play with in-app purchases, where you have no limitations on how much money you spend. So if you want to just lose all the moral values and make a lot of money, make it free to play with in-app purchases. You're getting filthy rich instantly. But if you want to keep your morals, either wait to the market change or develop a great application that do not rely too much on the skin in the box in order to have people coming back and purchasing. And it's not surprising that people pirate games with an upfront price. Just look at here, Balloons Tower Defense 5. You might have played it, you might have tried it, but imagine never seen it before. This is everything in Metroid. And now you have to decide, do you want to spend, I think it's 25 kroner on it to purchase it? You just have a name, some pictures, some text, and a score. That's really hard to judge. It's like judging an entire book by its cover. You need something more than that. And that's probably one of the reasons that having a demo of your app makes for less piracy. But then again, it's kind of surprising that having in-app purchases while having the actual app being free increases piracy, but they didn't really find any cause for that. So personally, I think this all will change. I think the market will adapt to the insane moral values that we've got right now. Like, people are going to realize how bad some of the free-to-play titles are, how exploited they are. And I really like all of you to sometime later watch the latest extra credit episode on that, where they sort of talk about the really bad sides of free-to-play. And it will probably change. But then again, being an app developer is really hard. 30% of everything you make up front goes right to the App Store. Then your taxes, VAT, everything, development uptime. It's a hard market. And it's really hard to make a living sometimes, especially on this new field right now. That's what I have.
Right, thank you very much. Comments, feelings, yep.
I think it's a very interesting topic and quite nice essay you've written, and it's quite easy to follow. There's one point that I want to just point out in the essay that I saw was that you compare a bar of chocolate in kroners towards dollars.
Yeah,
it might change every night.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
I think the best is to switch all to NOK or all to dollar.
Yes.
Either way, yeah. Be consistent, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really fair point. I was thinking about that for us.
And I just want to hear thoughts on something about piracy, which I'm not sure if you mentioned, but you have also the social factor as well.
Yeah.
I think where, for example, I can, for example, talk to Bryggen, hey, you have to check out this new cool shooting app, 1v1me, but it costs like 2 or 3 kroners maybe. And maybe that would be enough for him, that I would challenge him on that app for him to purchase the app. Although it's just a few kroners, maybe that's enough. Or whether that's too much for him and he would rather pirate the app instead. And yeah.
The thing is that if you want to pirate, you just go to a pirate website. Of course, the initial time, the first time, it has a bit of setup, but the next time it's actually easier than going to Google Play. Of course, why wouldn't he go to that page, save a few bucks? Simple as that. That's really part of the problem. Android especially is made for piracy. That's a lot of developers that keep telling us. And the only way I've found to combat this is using app that supports in-app purchases, because it's then you have to go up to the server, and it uses multiplayer, because you can pirate it for yourself, but it's hard work up against multiplayer. because the server is going to deny you access if you're pirating and stuff like that. And actually, I've seen some people pirating the entire server too, but then you have the social element taking people back. Like your friend is playing on a pirated server, nobody wants to play with him. They want to play with you instead, which are on the legal server. And of course, scores feel more important if you're playing on the legit system.
Yep.
Yep.
I also like your topic, and so I feel like you're very interested in this topic. And in order to comment one of things that you mentioned about social factors that influence, like to do this, to download in piracy way application. So my opinion is that biggest part of people from post-Soviet Union countries, it's their mentality. They don't think that this is a crime to download like in piracy way. So in their mentality, it's not a crime. It's not the same as, for example, like to steal something from the shop. It's not the same in their mentality. That's why it's kind of social factor.
Yeah, that's something actually discussed in the paper, is that,
Okay, yeah.
like, for example, a normal movie, it's 200 kroner. A game can be 500 to 600 kroner. That's a lot of money. So we feel a bit more criminal when you sort of steal it. But stealing an app that's priced at $1, you don't think about it at all. That's just too low. And in addition, they actually found that most users that download the majority of that do not have a credit card, and that's a major hurdle for them to overcome. Because, like, if you don't have a credit card, you can't purchase an app. Of course, you can buy a gift card, but who does that? And that's a really major problem. It's really hard to be legit, and it's really easy on your sort of personal morals to be a pirate because of the low price and low consequences.
Yep, I like the topic. I think it is important for not just games and apps, but for software developers in general, like how you monetize on your work. I like the structure. I felt it explains kind of the concepts, gradually. The only thing I was a little bit worried is that it is a complex issue, and the essay kind of is complex as well. So you touch on multiple aspects, and you leave the reader feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the complexity of the issue, right? Which is fine. I'm not saying it's kind of you can solve it, right? But you could provide a little bit more structure in a sense that you highlight the main kind of elements, which you do it towards the end of what to pay attention to. So it is a complex issue. It has a lot of kind of compounding variables. A lot of things can come in place, and some things are sort of dealt independently. Like the fight with piracy is kind of independent of me making decision how I should monetize on my app today, right? If there is no piracy, that's good. But currently, the world is like this. What I do today? So you can leave it. So I don't know, like, what do you feel? Do you feel it was kind of clear what you should do now as an app developer, or was it still like, yeah, it's kind of hard, it's difficult, it's a complex issue? Yes?
It's actually a really complex issue. And actually, no, I'm developing apps, but now after the paper, I don't know what should I do. How should I structure my app, or what kind of billing I should
model to use, exactly. So, which is fine. I mean, if that is what you intended in the essay to achieve, to kind of make the word appear complex and kind of rich, that's fine. But if your goal was to convey some sort of a simple how-to to the reader, then it's not doing that, right? In a sense.
Yeah.
It depends what you want to achieve as a final thing. So I'm not saying one or the other is better. I'm just saying you have to make a conscious choice, and the current essay feels like it is a complicated issue, and you're not really giving kind of a clear guidance of what to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
There it's no good solution, but it was actually sort of more of my point to sort of just educate everyone on it's really hard to do it right, and because a lot of people just have the mindset of you just make an app and make a lot of money. That's it. Just make people realize it's actually kind of hard, and there's an insane amount of developers falling short of their dream of making that dream application which they would live off for the rest of their lives. It's just a handful of applications that actually make it. In the end.
Exactly. All right. Any other comments? Suggestions? All right. Thank you very much. It was a really good presentation as well. It was kind of easy to follow your train of thoughts during the presentation too. So kind of well done. So I hope those who are not presenting today got some ideas and got some cues of what to use and how to, what sort of game elements to use or essay elements to use to make the essay sort of work certain way. So the deadline is Friday. I would like everybody to email me by Friday the essays, and then I will sort of set up. I will tell you where the essays will go and where the comments and counter arguments will go. So we'll have a sort of an electronic system to submit those. But for the essay submission, just email me your final version. Or I may open a Fronter page maybe. So I just do it today. I open a Fronter folder and then you submit your essays there. Unless it's, if it's a plain text, you can submit it on Fronter too.
So it's Friday midnight?
It will be Friday midnight, yeah.
So it's night to Saturday.
Sorry?
Yeah. It's night to Saturday, right? Or
yes, yeah.
Send it as a PDF.
You can send it as PDF, yeah. Or you can, if you want, you can submit as a Google Doc if it's a Google Doc as well. So you can just submit the URL.
Yeah, I can change it after that. So.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe do a snapshot as a PDF, yeah. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.